My name is Katherine Johnson, but everyone calls me Kate. At 38 years old, I never imagined that after dedicating 18 years of my life to Horizon Technologies, I would be sitting across from a smirking manager who had been with the company for less than 6 months. You should be thanking us. Thomas laughed as he terminated my employment. What he did not know was that buried in my contract was a clause that would turn the tables completely. If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Hit the like button and subscribe to hear how I went from being fired to becoming their boss overnight. I joined Horizon Technologies right out of college, with a degree in computer engineering. Back then, the company was relatively small with only about 50 employees. The founder, Harold Warren, was a visionary who believed in nurturing talent and rewarding loyalty. I started as a junior programmer, working on basic software development projects. My starting salary was modest $35,000 annually, but I was passionate about the work and grateful for the opportunity. During my first 3 years, I immersed myself in learning everything I could about the business. I volunteered for extra projects, stayed late when deadlines loomed, and made suggestions for improvements whenever I saw an opportunity. Harold noticed my dedication and began to mentor me directly. By my 5th year, I had been promoted twice and was leading a small team of developers. Kate has that rare combination of technical brilliance and people skills, Harold once told the board during an annual review. She understands both the code and the clients. That vote of confidence led to me being put in charge of our first major government contract, a $12 million project developing security software. The project was challenging with tight deadlines and exacting specifications. There were nights when I barely slept troubleshooting problems and reconfiguring systems. But when we delivered the project 2 weeks ahead of schedule and under budget, it cemented my reputation within the company. Harold promoted me to Director of Software Development, making me one of the youngest directors in company history. Over the next decade, I helped grow Horizon from a small tech firm to a mid-sized corporation with over 300 employees. We expanded from government contracts to private sector work, developing proprietary software solutions for healthcare, finance, and education. My team grew from 5 people to 50, and our division consistently brought in 40% of the company revenue. Throughout these years, Harold and I maintained a close professional relationship. He valued my input on strategic decisions and included me in high-level meetings with major clients and investors. Kate knows this company almost as well as I do, he would say, and she knows the technology better than I ever will. When Harold turned 65, he began talking about retirement. It was not a shock, but it still sent ripples of anxiety through the company. Harold had been the heart and soul of Horizon, and his leadership style had created a culture of innovation, respect, and work-life balance that made us stand out in the cutthroat tech industry. I am not leaving the company in just anyone's hands, Harold assured us during the announcement. The board and I have been planning this transition for years. The new CEO, Victor Barnes, came with impressive credentials. He had previously led a tech company that specialized in artificial intelligence and had overseen its acquisition by a larger corporation for hundreds of millions of dollars. On paper, he seemed like the perfect choice to take Horizon to the next level. During the transition period, I met with Victor several times. He was polite but distant, focused more on financial reports and market projections than on the people who had built the company. Still, I tried to remain optimistic. Change is always difficult, I told myself, and Victor needed time to settle in and understand our company culture. Shortly after Harold's retirement party, I noticed subtle changes beginning to take place. The open-door policy that had been a hallmark of Harold's leadership was replaced with formal meeting requests and strict hierarchical communication. Team-building events and company picnics were cut from the budget as unnecessary expenses. The flexible work arrangements that had helped us retain top talent were suddenly under review. During this period, I was fortunate to have a mentor outside the company. Patricia Winters had been Harold's legal counsel during Horizon's early days before starting her own legal practice. She had helped negotiate my promotions over the years and had become a trusted advisor and friend. Always protect yourself in business, Kate Patricia had told me during one of our lunches. Loyalty is valuable, but contracts are binding. Following her advice, I had negotiated certain protections into my employment agreement over the years. The most significant was a clause that Patricia had suggested after my 15th year with the company, when I had turned down a lucrative offer from a competitor to stay with Horizon. If they value you enough to match that offer, They should be willing to give you additional security, Patricia had said. The clause she helped me include seemed like an unlikely scenario at the time, but Patricia insisted it was important. Think of it as an insurance policy, she had explained. One you hope you will never need to use. Little did I know then how prophetic those words would prove to be. 6 months after Victor Barnes took over as CEO, he announced a reorganization of the executive team. Several longtime directors were moved to different departments and new managers were brought in from outside the company. Among them was Thomas Reynolds, who was appointed as the new director of operations with oversight of multiple departments including mine. Thomas was in his early 40s with slicked back hair and designer suits that seemed out of place in our normally casual office environment. From our first meeting, I sensed his hostility. While he smiled and spoke about synergy and optimization, his eyes remained cold and calculating. I have reviewed your department's performance metrics, he said during our initial one-on-one meeting, and frankly, I see a lot of inefficiencies that need to be addressed. I was taken aback. My team consistently met or exceeded our targets and had some of the highest client satisfaction ratings in the company. I would be happy to walk you through our processes, I offered. We have developed systems over years that might not be immediately apparent in the metrics. Thomas waved his hand dismissively. The numbers do not lie, Katherine. We need to streamline operations and cut the dead weight. Over the next few weeks, Thomas began implementing changes without consulting me. He reassigned several of my most experienced team members to other projects and brought in consultants who had worked with him at his previous company. When I raised concerns about disrupting established workflows, Thomas accused me of resisting progress and being stuck in outdated methodologies. The situation deteriorated further when Thomas began excluding me from meetings about projects my team was directly responsible for. I would learn about major decisions affecting my department after they had already been finalized. When clients requested to work specifically with me, based on our long-standing relationships, Thomas would intercept these requests and assign them to his newly hired team members. One morning I arrived at work to find that my security clearance had been downgraded. I could no longer access certain servers and project files that I had helped develop. When I confronted Thomas about this, he claimed it was a company-wide security protocol update, and that access was now being granted on a need-to-know basis. The most egregious incident occurred 6 months into Thomas's tenure. My team had been working on an innovative customer relationship management system for a major healthcare provider, a project I had personally secured and designed. The night before our final presentation to the client, Thomas informed me that he would be leading the presentation instead. This is a critical client, and I need to ensure everything goes smoothly, he said with a condescending smile. You can observe and take notes on my approach for future reference. I was furious but maintained my composure. Thomas, I've been working with this client for 7 years. They specifically requested that I lead this project because of our established relationship. And now they will establish a relationship with the new leadership, he replied. This decision is not up for discussion. The next day I watched in stunned silence as Thomas presented my team's work, as if it had been his initiative from the beginning. He never once acknowledged my contributions, or even mentioned my name. Worse still, when the client specifically asked about certain features I had designed, Thomas claimed them as his own innovations. After the meeting, one of my longtime colleagues, Samantha Wright, pulled me aside. What is going on, Kate? Everyone can see that Thomas is deliberately pushing you out. Have you spoken to Victor about this? I had tried multiple times to schedule a meeting with Victor, but my requests were repeatedly denied by his assistant, who informed me that the CEO only meets with direct reports, and Thomas is your supervisor now. Samantha lowered her voice. People are talking. Thomas has been bringing in his old colleagues from Vertex Solutions, and there are rumors that he is planning to replace more of the original team. I thought you should know that he and Victor apparently go way back. They were college roommates or something. This revelation explained a lot. Thomas was not just a new manager. He was Victor's trusted ally, brought in specifically to reshape the company according to their shared vision, regardless of the institutional knowledge that might be lost in the process. As the weeks passed, I found myself increasingly isolated. Colleagues who had once freely shared ideas and sought my advice now avoided me, fearful of being associated with someone who had clearly fallen out of favor with the new management. Projects that had once been mine were reassigned one by one, and my role became more ambiguous with each passing day. Despite the mounting evidence that I was being deliberately sidelined, I continued to perform my duties with professionalism and dedication. I documented everything, saving emails, recording meetings when permitted, and keeping detailed notes of all interactions with Thomas and other managers. Something in my gut told me that I might need this documentation someday. My fears were confirmed during a quarterly review meeting where department heads presented their achievements and challenges to the executive team. When it was my turn to speak, Thomas interrupted me, repeatedly questioning my data and contradicting my assessments in front of everyone. "I think Katherine is missing the bigger picture," he said, turning to address Victor directly. "Her department has been operating in isolation for too long, resistant to the integrated approach we are trying to implement. Perhaps it is time to consider whether her position still serves the company's evolving needs." The message was clear. My days at Horizon Technologies were numbered. 3 weeks after that quarterly review meeting, an email went out to all employees announcing a company-wide restructuring. The message sent from Victor's office spoke of streamlining operations, eliminating redundancies, and positioning Horizon for future growth in a competitive market. Reading between the lines, it was clearly preparing the ground for layoffs. I immediately tried to schedule a meeting with Victor to discuss my department's standing in this restructuring. His assistant informed me that the CEO's calendar was fully booked for the next 3 weeks, but that I should rest assured that all decisions would be communicated through proper channels. Those proper channels, it seemed, meant Thomas, who continued to avoid giving me any concrete information. "These strategic decisions are being handled at the executive level," he told me, when I pressed him for details. "Your focus should be on maintaining current operations until further notice." The next day, I noticed a new face in the office. Michael Peterson, a man I had never met before, was introduced as a strategic consultant who would be shadowing various departments to optimize workflows. Coincidentally or not, he spent the first 3 days exclusively shadowing me. Michael asked endless questions about my projects, my team structure, my client relationships, and my historical knowledge of the company. It felt less like a consultation and more like an interrogation, or worse, like he was being trained to replace me. During this time, I also discovered something troubling. While searching for some historical data for a client request, I found that several of my old project emails and documentation had been deleted from the company servers. Fortunately, following Patricia's advice years ago, I had maintained my own secure backups of all important communications and project materials. One evening, working late, I overheard a conversation between Thomas and Michael in the conference room next to my office. They had clearly assumed the floor was empty. "Once Katherine is out, we can restructure the entire department," Thomas was saying. "Most of her team can be replaced with our people from Vertex at lower salaries, and the clients will never know the difference." "What about her institutional knowledge?" Michael asked. "She has been here since the beginning." Thomas laughed. "That is why you are here, learning everything she knows. Besides, in tech, historical knowledge is overrated. We need forward thinkers, not museum curators preserving the past." I felt physically ill hearing my 18 years of dedication reduced to an inconvenience to be eliminated. That night I called Patricia and updated her on the situation. She listened carefully and then gave me direct advice. "Start gathering everything, Kate. Every achievement, every client testimonial, every piece of evidence showing your value to the company, and any mistreatment you have experienced. And review your contract again, particularly Section 17. The next morning I came to work early to continue documenting my contributions and securing copies of my work before more files could mysteriously disappear. At 9:30 a.m., I received a terse email from Human Resources requesting my presence in Conference Room B at 10 a.m. for an important discussion regarding your position. My heart pounded as I saved my final files to my personal encrypted drive. This was it. After 18 years, it would end in a sterile conference room with people who had known me for less than a year. When I entered Conference Room B, Thomas was already seated beside Laura Thompson from HR. Laura looked uncomfortable, her eyes fixed on the folder in front of her. Thomas, in contrast, looked almost gleeful. "Katherine, please have a seat," Laura began formally. "As you know, Horizon Technologies is undergoing significant restructuring to better position ourselves in the market." I sat silently watching as Laura struggled through her clearly rehearsed speech about changing company needs and departmental reorganization. She avoided eye contact throughout. Therefore, she continued, "We regret to inform you that your position has been eliminated effective immediately." Though I had been expecting this, The finality of the words still hit me like a physical blow. Your personal belongings will be packed by security and sent to your home address, Laura added. This is standard procedure for departures at your level. Standard procedure, I finally spoke. I have given 18 years to this company. I helped build it from the ground up, and you are treating me like a criminal. That is exactly the problem, Thomas interjected, no longer bothering to hide his satisfaction. You think your history here entitles you to special treatment. The truth is the company has carried you for years out of some misplaced sense of loyalty. You should be thanking us for letting you stay this long. I stared at him in disbelief as he continued. The tech industry moved on, Katherine. While you were comfortable in your little fiefdom here, the rest of us were innovating, taking risks, creating the future. Harold may have tolerated your outdated methods, but Horizon needs forward thinkers now. Laura looked mortified by Thomas's outburst, but said nothing to contradict him. Instead, she slid a document across the table toward me. This is your severance package, she explained quietly. 2-month salary continuation of health benefits for 30 days, and a non-disclosure agreement that prohibits you from discussing the terms of your separation or making disparaging remarks about Horizon Technologies. I did not touch the document, and if I do not sign... Thomas's smile widened. Then you get nothing. No severance, no references, no goodwill. Your choice, Katherine. I stood up slowly, gathering my dignity around me like armor. I will have my lawyer review this document before making any decisions. Your lawyer, Thomas laughed. For a standard termination, that seems excessive. 18 years is not a standard termination, I replied evenly, and I would like my personal items delivered unopened, please. Some of them have sentimental value. Laura nodded quickly. Of course, we will ensure everything is handled with care. As security escorted me from the building, I kept my head high, though inside I was screaming. Employees who had once been friends looked away, as I passed their faces masks of pity and fear. By the time I reached my car in the parking garage, my hands were shaking so badly, I could barely insert the key into the ignition. 18 years of my life, gone in a 20-minute meeting. The drive home passed in a blur. I moved on autopilot, barely registering the familiar streets and traffic lights. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in silence for several minutes, too numb to move. The full weight of what had happened began to sink in, bringing waves of emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. Shock gave way to grief, and grief to burning anger. How dare they dismiss my contributions so callously? How dare Thomas suggest I should be grateful for being discarded like obsolete technology? I finally went inside and poured myself a glass of wine, hands still trembling. Then I called the one person I knew would understand and help Patricia. They did it, I said when she answered. They fired me this morning. Patricia's voice was calm, but concerned. Tell me everything exactly as it happened. I recounted the meeting in detail, including Thomas's cruel remarks and the severance agreement they had pressured me to sign. You did the right thing, not signing anything, Patricia assured me. And Kate, do you remember the clause we added to your contract during your 15th year, the one Harold agreed to when you turned down the offer from Innovatech? A vague memory surfaced. Something about shares if I was ever terminated. I honestly never thought it would come into play. Pull out your contract and look at Section 17, Patricia instructed. The provision we included was an option to purchase company shares at their value from the time the clause was written, in the event of termination without cause before your 20th year of employment. I found my copy of the employment contract and flipped to Section 17. The legal language was dense, but the essence of the clause was exactly as Patricia had described. If I was terminated without cause before completing 20 years with the company, I would have the option to purchase shares at their valuation from 5 years ago when the clause was added. But what good does that do me now, I asked. I cannot afford to buy significant shares, and even if I could, what would be the point? The point, Patricia explained, is that Horizon's share value has increased more than 5 times since that clause was written, largely due to the government contracts you secured. Buying at the old valuation would be like getting an 80% discount, and there is more. She paused, and I could hear her typing in the background. Horizon has been having financial difficulties they have not disclosed publicly. I represent several tech companies, and word gets around. They have been losing major clients over the past year, and there are rumors of cash flow problems. I suspect your firing is part of a larger cost-cutting measure, disguised as restructuring. A thought occurred to me. Is that why Thomas has been bringing in people from his old company at lower salaries to cut costs? Exactly, Patricia confirmed. And there is another interesting piece to this puzzle. The clause specifies that your share purchase option would be at priority level, meaning it would be fulfilled before any pending sales or transfers of ownership. Why would that matter? Because Patricia said slowly, I have heard rumors that Victor is in talks to sell Horizon to a larger corporation. If that is true, and if we move quickly with your share purchase option, we could potentially block or significantly influence that sale. My mind was spinning with the implications. But where would I get the money to buy enough shares to make a difference? That is our next step, Patricia replied. I know several investors who might be interested in backing you, especially given the potential return if we can right the ship. And do not forget you know more about Horizon's operations and client relationships than anyone. That knowledge has value. I also have something else, I admitted, telling her about the backups I had maintained of all my projects' client communications and achievements. I have documentation proving that several major clients worked exclusively with Horizon because of their relationship with me. Perfect, Patricia, said her voice, taking on the determined tone I recognized from past negotiations. Tomorrow morning I am going to contact Diana Maxwell, the company's corporate counsel. Diana and I go way back, and I suspect she may not be fully aware of the circumstances of your termination. Over the next 48 hours, Patricia and I worked tirelessly to build our case. Diana Maxwell agreed to meet with us confidentially, bringing copies of board minutes and financial reports that painted a troubling picture of Horizon's current state. Victor has been presenting an overly optimistic view to the board, Diana explained during our meeting. Several major clients have already indicated they will not be renewing their contracts, largely due to concerns about the company's new direction and the loss of key personnel like yourself. Diana also confirmed that my termination had been presented to the board as a mutual agreement, rather than a firing, with Thomas claiming I had been looking for an opportunity to exit. That is absolutely false, I said, showing her the recording I had made of the termination meeting. Diana looked troubled as she listened to Thomas's mocking tone and explicit statement that I was being fired. This contradicts what the board was told, she said after the recording ended. And it clearly constitutes termination without cause, which triggers your Section 17 rights. While Diana researched the legal implications, Patricia reached out to Edward Collins, a board member who had been a friend of Harold's and had always supported the company's original mission and culture. Edward was not at the last board meeting where your termination was discussed, Patricia reported back. He had a family emergency. I suspect Victor deliberately scheduled the discussion, knowing Edward would be absent. Edward agreed to meet with us privately. A distinguished man in his 60s, he listened gravely as we presented our evidence of mismanagement and deception. Harold always spoke very highly of you, Kate, he said when we had finished. He considered you the heart and soul of what made Horizon special. I am deeply disturbed by what you have shared today. Edward confirmed that Victor had been pushing for a quick sale of the company to Tech Giant Corporation, a move that would likely result in Horizon being absorbed and dismantled for its intellectual property and client list. Several of us on the board have been concerned about the direction Victor is taking, but we lacked concrete evidence of wrongdoing, Edward explained. This information changes everything. With Edward's support, Diana's legal expertise, and Patricia's strategic guidance, we formulated a plan. I would exercise my option to purchase shares at the old valuation backed by a group of investors Patricia had assembled, who believed in my vision for the company. Diana would call an emergency board meeting, citing urgent contractual matters requiring immediate attention. And Edward would ensure that all board members were present, including those who had been increasingly sidelined by Victor. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Everything I had worked for over the past 18 years would come down to what happened in that boardroom. The company I had helped build, the clients I had nurtured, relationships with the employees who had been callously discarded, all of it hung in the balance. Are you ready for this? Patricia asked when she picked me up the next morning. I took a deep breath. I have been ready for 18 years. I just did not know it until now. The Horizon Technologies headquarters had always felt like a second home to me. Now, as Patricia and I walked through the glass doors into the lobby, I felt like an intruder. The security guard at the front desk, Brian, did a double take when he saw me. Miss Johnson, I thought. We were told you no longer work here. I am here for the board meeting, Brian, I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. Diana Maxwell should have added me to the visitors list. Brian checked his computer, his eyebrows rising in surprise. Yes, here you are. You will need to sign in and wear this visitor badge. As we waited for the elevator, Thomas emerged from a side hallway, engrossed in conversation with Michael. When he spotted me, he stopped mid-sentence, his face flushing with anger. What are you doing here? He demanded, striding toward us. You are not authorized to be on these premises. Patricia stepped forward every inch, the formidable attorney. Miss Johnson is here at the request of corporate counsel for the emergency board meeting. I suggest you check your email, Mr. Reynolds. Thomas pulled out his phone, scrolling furiously through his messages. His face paled slightly as he presumably found Diana's meeting notification. This is irregular, he muttered. Victor should have been consulted before calling a board meeting. The corporate bylaws allow the company's legal counsel to call emergency meetings when contractual issues of significant impact arise, Patricia replied smoothly. No CEO approval required. The elevator arrived with a soft chime and we stepped inside. Thomas hurriedly joined us, positioning himself between me and the elevator buttons, as if I might try to access restricted floors. Whatever you think you are doing, Katherine, it will not work, he said in a low voice. You signed an employment contract that gives the company full discretion over termination decisions. I met his gaze steadily. I suggest you review Section 17 of that contract, Thomas, particularly the parts about share purchase options upon termination without cause. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face before he masked it with a dismissive smile. Victor has the full support of the board. This little stunt will only embarrass you further. The elevator opened on the executive floor, and Thomas immediately hurried ahead of us, presumably to warn Victor of our arrival. Patricia squeezed my arm reassuringly as we walked toward the boardroom. Remember, she whispered, you know this company better than anyone in that room. Stand your ground. Diana Maxwell was waiting outside the boardroom, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She nodded to us professionally. The board is assembling now, she said. Victor is displeased about the meeting, but unable to prevent it. Edward has ensured all members are either present or connected via secure video conference. Inside the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Victor Barnes sat at the head of the table, his normally composed face tight with barely contained fury. Thomas stood beside him, leaning down to whisper something in his ear. Around the table sat the 8 members of Horizon's board of directors, including Edward Collins, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. What is the meaning of this, Diana? Victor demanded as we entered. And why is a former employee present at a confidential board meeting? Diana closed the door behind us and walked calmly to her seat. This emergency meeting has been called to address a serious contractual matter involving Miss Johnson's termination and its implications for the company's financial and legal standing. Miss Johnson was terminated for cause as part of our ongoing restructuring, Victor stated flatly. Any contractual obligations were addressed in her severance package, which she did not sign. Patricia interjected, placing her briefcase on the table. And the record will show that her termination was explicitly not for cause, as evidenced by this recording from the termination meeting itself. Without waiting for permission, Patricia played the audio of Thomas telling me I should be thanking them for letting me stay so long, clearly stating I was being fired as part of restructuring, not for performance issues. Several board members exchanged concerned glances. One, an older woman named Janet Blackwell, leaned forward with a frown. This directly contradicts what we were told, Victor. You specifically stated that Miss Johnson had been underperforming and had agreed that it was time for her to move on. Semantics, Victor dismissed with a wave of his hand. The point is, she is no longer with the company, and this meeting is a waste of valuable time. Diana Maxwell stood and placed a document on the table, sliding it toward the center, where all board members could see it. This is Section 17 of Miss Johnson's employment contract, signed and approved by the previous CEO and the board 5 years ago. It stipulates that in the event of termination without cause, prior to her 20th year of employment, Miss Johnson has the option to purchase company shares at their valuation at the time this contract was executed. The room fell into stunned silence as the implications sank in. That is absurd, Thomas finally sputtered. Share values have more than quintupled since then. No one would agree to such terms. Edward Collins cleared his throat. I was on the board when this contract was approved, Mr. Reynolds. Miss Johnson had received a very lucrative offer from a competitor which she declined out of loyalty to Horizon. This clause was part of the retention package we offered in recognition of her value to the company and her 15 years of service at that time. Even so, Victor argued, regaining his composure, the financial impact would be minimal. How many shares could she possibly afford to purchase? At this, Patricia opened her briefcase and removed another document which she handed to Diana. My client has secured backing from a consortium of investors who believe in her vision for Horizon Technologies. They have provided funding for her to exercise her full option rights under Section 17, which amounts to 22% of outstanding shares at the valuation from 5 years ago. Victor's face paled visibly. That is impossible. The board would never approve such a large transfer of shares at below market value. The board's approval is not required, Diana stated firmly. The contract is binding and was duly executed with all necessary authorizations. Furthermore, Miss Johnson's purchase option takes priority over any pending sales or transfers of ownership as clearly stated in subsection C. At this, Victor slammed his hand on the table. This is clearly a calculated attempt to interfere with legitimate business operations. We are in the final stages of negotiating a highly advantageous sale to Tech Giant Corporation. A sale that was never properly presented to or approved by this board, Edward pointed out. A sale that would essentially dismantle the company Harold Warren spent his life building. The boardroom erupted into confused discussions with various members demanding explanations and others expressing outrage at being kept in the dark about the proposed sale. Thomas attempted to interject several times, but his protests were drowned out by the growing chorus of concerned voices. Finally, Janet Blackwell rapped her knuckles sharply on the table. Enough. As the longest-serving board member after Edward I, move that we take a step back and properly evaluate the situation. She turned to me directly. Miss Johnson, beyond exercising your share purchase option, what exactly are you proposing here? All eyes turned to me. This was the moment I had prepared for. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward to address the board. For 18 years, I have dedicated myself to making Horizon Technologies a leader in our industry. I have built relationships with clients who trust us, developed innovative solutions that have generated millions in revenue, and helped create a company culture that attracted and retained the best talent in the field. I looked directly at Victor and Thomas. In less than a year, the current management has damaged those client relationships, pushed out experienced employees who built this company, and apparently concealed financial difficulties while secretly arranging to sell off the client relationships, company's assets. Turning back to the board members, I continued. I am proposing to exercise my share purchase option as is my legal right. With the backing of investors who believe in Horizon's original mission and values, I intend to acquire sufficient shares to have a meaningful voice in the company's future direction. I am not looking for revenge or control. I am looking to protect what Harold Warren built and what hundreds of dedicated employees past and present have contributed to over the years. A silence fell over the room as my words sank in. Then Edward Collins spoke. I move that we formally acknowledge Miss Johnson's contractual rights and proceed with the share transfer as specified in her employment agreement. Janet Blackwell seconded the motion, and Diana called for a vote. Victor and Thomas watched in barely concealed horror as 7 of the 8 board members voted to affirm my rights under the contract. The sole dissenting vote was from Marcus Harding, a recent appointee who had been brought in by Victor. The motion carries, Diana announced formally. Miss Johnson's share purchase option will be executed according to the terms specified in Section 17 of her employment contract. Victor leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. This is not over. Tech Giant will not proceed with the acquisition if there is any question about controlling interest. Perhaps that is for the best, Edward replied calmly. This board has not yet determined that selling to Tech Giant is in the company's best interest. The meeting continued for another hour as financial experts were called in to confirm the valuation process and legal representatives documented the share transfer agreement. Throughout it all, Thomas sat in stunned silence, occasionally glancing at me with a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. By the end of the meeting, I had signed the necessary documents to purchase 22% of Horizon Technologies at the valuation from 5 years ago, making me the largest individual shareholder in the company. As the board members filed out of the room, some stopping to speak with me quietly and express their support, Victor and Thomas remained seated, their posture rigid with tension. "You have no idea what you have done," Victor said when we were finally alone. "You cannot run this company. You are a programmer, not a CEO." I gathered my papers calmly. "I was never just a programmer, Victor. I was the person who helped build this company from the ground up, who knows every client, every project, every strength and weakness. And unlike you, I never planned to dismantle it for parts." With that, I walked out of the boardroom, my heart lighter than it had been in months. The battle was not over, but for the first time since Harold's retirement, I felt hope for Horizon's future. The days following the emergency board meeting were a whirlwind of activity. News of my share purchase and the block sale to tech giant spread quickly throughout the company and the industry. Victor called an all-staff meeting, attempting to downplay the significance of these developments, but the uncertainty was palpable in every department. Meanwhile, Diana Maxwell worked with the board to formally document the implications of my new position as the largest individual shareholder. Although my 22% stake did not give me outright control of the company, it did provide me with significant influence, particularly when combined with board members like Edward and Janet, who shared my concerns about the current leadership. A week after the emergency meeting, a second board meeting was convened to address the company's leadership structure. Edward Collins had spent the intervening days speaking individually with each board member, building consensus around the need for immediate changes. "The evidence of mismanagement is substantial," Edward stated, as he presented a detailed financial analysis prepared by an independent auditor. "Revenue has declined by 28% in the past 2 quarters. 4 major clients have terminated their contracts, citing dissatisfaction with recent changes in service and personnel. And employee turnover has reached unprecedented levels, with 40 senior staff members leaving in the past 6 months alone." The auditor, Jennifer Blake, a sharp-minded woman with decades of experience in the tech industry, walked the board through additional findings. "Based on current trajectories, Horizon will face serious cash flow problems within 4 to 6 months, she explained, pointing to a graph showing declining reserves. "The restructuring undertaken by current management has focused on short-term cost-cutting at the expense of long-term client relationships and institutional knowledge." Jennifer then turned to the blocked sale to tech giant. "Our analysis indicates that the proposed sale price was approximately 60% of fair market value, even accounting for recent financial difficulties. Had the sale proceeded, shareholders would have received significantly less than they should have for their investments." Victor attempted to defend his decisions, claiming that the restructuring was necessary to position the company for future growth, and that the tech giant offer represented the best available option given market conditions. But his arguments found little support among the increasingly skeptical board members. "The fundamental issue," Janet Blackwell noted, "is one of trust. The board was not fully informed about the extent of client dissatisfaction, the true reasons for staff departures, or the details of the tech giant negotiations. How can we have confidence in leadership that withholds crucial information?" Thomas, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke up in Victor's defense. "The tech industry moves quickly," he argued. "Difficult decisions sometimes need to be made without the luxury of extended consultation. Everything we did was aimed at ensuring Horizon's survival in a competitive market, including firing the person responsible for securing our largest government contracts," Edward asked pointedly. "Contracts that, according to Miss Blake's analysis, represent 35% of our total revenue." Thomas had no effective response to this, and the discussion turned to potential leadership changes. After extensive deliberation, the board voted 6-2 to remove Victor Barnes as CEO, citing loss of confidence and failure to fulfill fiduciary duties. In a separate vote, Thomas Reynolds was removed from his position as Director of Operations. As he gathered his things to leave the boardroom, he paused beside my chair. "You will regret this," he said quietly. "You have no idea what it takes to run a company in today's environment." I looked up at him calmly. "I know exactly what it takes, Thomas. It takes vision, integrity, and respect for the people who make the company what it is, things you never understood." With Victor and Thomas removed, the board appointed Edward Collins as interim CEO, while a search committee was formed to identify a permanent replacement. To my surprise, Edward immediately suggested that I be appointed as Chief Strategy Officer, a newly created position reporting directly to the CEO and board. "Kate knows this company better than anyone," he explained. "Her insights will be invaluable as we work to repair client relationships and rebuild our internal culture." The motion passed unanimously, And just like that, 10 days after being escorted from the building as a terminated employee, I returned to Horizon Technologies as a major shareholder and executive officer. My first day back was surreal. Many employees looked shocked to see me walking through the halls with a new security badge and access to the executive floor. Some avoided eye contact, perhaps embarrassed by their silence during my termination. Others stopped me to express their happiness at my return, sharing stories of how the company had changed for the worse in recent months. Samantha Wright, who had warned me about Thomas's plans, was one of the first to visit my new office. "I cannot believe you pulled this off," she said, shaking her head in amazement. "When security walked you out that day, I thought it was over." "So did I admitted. But sometimes the end is just the beginning of something else." My first official act as Chief Strategy Officer was to conduct a thorough review of all personnel changes made during Victor and Thomas's tenure. With Edward's support, I arranged for the return of several key employees who had been terminated or forced out, including lead developers, project managers, and client relations specialists who had been with the company for years. I also initiated a comprehensive audit of all client accounts, personally calling our top 20 clients to assure them that Horizon was returning to its core values of quality, innovation, and responsive service. Many expressed relief, with several indicating they had been considering following our lost clients to competitors. "We stayed because of our history with you and Horizon," the director of technology at one of our largest healthcare clients told me. "But we were getting close to our breaking point with all the new faces and declining service levels." The most difficult task was dealing with the employees Thomas had brought in from his previous company. Many were competent professionals who had simply followed their boss to a new opportunity, unaware of the circumstances of our restructuring. I met with each of them individually, evaluating their skills and attitudes before making decisions about their future with Horizon. "I do not blame you for the actions of your former boss," I explained during these meetings. "But going forward, everyone at Horizon needs to embrace our core values and collaborative approach." Some chose to leave when they understood the new direction. Others expressed eagerness to remain and contribute to the company's recovery. I made it clear that performance and teamwork, not personal connections, would determine who stayed. 3 weeks after my appointment, Thomas Reynolds returned to Horizon to collect his remaining personal items. Security informed me of his arrival, and I decided to meet him face-to-face one last time. I found him in his former office, placing framed certificates into a cardboard box. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of resentment and resignation. "Come to gloat?" he asked. "No," I replied honestly. "I came to ask you a question that has been bothering me. Why did you target me specifically? You could have restructured any department, pushed out any longtime director. Why me?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, weighing his words. "Because you represented everything Victor and I were trying to change," he finally said. "The old way of doing things, the obsession with company history and culture, the idea that relationships matter more than results. We saw you as the biggest obstacle to transforming Horizon into a leaner, more profitable operation that would attract acquisition interest." "And how did that work out?" I could not resist asking. A bitter smile crossed his face. "Obviously not as planned, but the tech industry is full of second chances. Victor already has offers from 2 different companies. I will land on my feet." "I am sure you will," I acknowledged. "Just remember that buildings are only as strong as their foundations. Trying to replace the foundation usually brings the whole thing down." As he left carrying his box of belongings through the same lobby where I had been escorted out weeks earlier, I felt no satisfaction, only a renewed determination to rebuild what had been damaged and strengthen what remained intact. The road ahead would not be easy. Horizon's finances had been more severely impacted by Victor's mismanagement than initially assessed. Several promising projects had been abandoned mid-development, requiring significant resources to revive, and the company culture, once our greatest strength, had been fractured by months of fear and uncertainty. But we had also retained our core assets, dedicated employees who believed in our mission, clients who valued our history of excellence, and the institutional knowledge that had made Horizon a leader in our field for 2 decades. As Edward and I worked late into the evening on a new strategic plan, he paused to look at me across the conference table. "Harold always said you would run this company someday," he remarked, "though I do not think even he imagined it would happen quite like this." I smiled, thinking of my former mentor. Harold taught me that a company is more than balance sheets and profit margins. It is a community of people working toward shared goals. That is what Victor and Thomas never understood, and it is what we need to rebuild now. Edward nodded thoughtfully. From fired to the largest shareholder in 10 days. That might be a record. Let us hope it is a record that never needs to be broken, I replied, because if we do this right, no one at Horizon will ever be treated the way I was again. 3 months after regaining my position at Horizon Technologies, I stood in the company cafeteria addressing all employees during our first State of the Company meeting since the leadership changes. The room was packed with remote employees joining via video conference, all eager to hear about our progress and future direction. When I returned to Horizon, we faced significant challenges. I began looking out at the sea of familiar and new faces. Our financial reserves were depleted. Client confidence was at an all-time low. And many of you were uncertain about your futures here. I paused, allowing my gaze to travel around the room. Today, I am pleased to report that we have turned a corner. Through your hard work and dedication, we have stabilized our financial position, renewed contracts with 16 major clients, and begun rebuilding the innovative, supportive culture that made Horizon special from the beginning. The journey to this point had been arduous. In the weeks following Victor and Thomas's departure, we had discovered additional problems requiring immediate attention. Projects had been mismanaged, client complaints ignored, and financial reports manipulated to present a more positive picture than reality warranted. Edward Collins had proven to be an exceptional interim CEO, providing steady leadership, while allowing me to focus on rebuilding our core operations and client relationships. Together, we had made difficult but necessary decisions, cutting unnecessary expenses while investing in the people and projects that would secure our future. One of my first initiatives had been to reinstate the company's educational assistance program, which Victor had eliminated as a cost-saving measure. Our people are our greatest asset, I explained to the board when proposing its return. Investing in their growth is investing in Horizon's future. I had also personally led the effort to reconnect with former clients who had left during Victor's tenure. Many were surprised to hear from me, having been told I had resigned to pursue other opportunities. When they learned the truth, several agreed to meetings to discuss potentially returning their business to Horizon. Franklin Medical Systems, a healthcare provider that had been with us for over a decade before leaving 6 months earlier, was the first major client to return. We left because the quality of service declined dramatically after you were gone, their CIO told me during our meeting. The new team did not understand our needs or the complexities of our systems. If you are back and rebuilding your original team, we want to be part of Horizon again. Within 2 months, we had recovered 5 major clients representing approximately $18 million in annual revenue. Each return bolstered employee morale and reinforced the value of our renewed focus on quality and client relationships. Internally, the culture was gradually healing. The fear and uncertainty that had permeated the office under Victor's leadership began to dissipate as employees saw that their jobs were secure and their contributions valued. I instituted regular town hall meetings where anyone could ask questions or raise concerns directly with leadership, eliminating the secretive top-down approach that had caused so much anxiety. We also implemented a formal mentorship program pairing experienced employees with newer team members to preserve institutional knowledge and strengthen connections across departments. The program was named after Harold Warren, honoring his belief in nurturing talent and building a community rather than just a company. Perhaps the most personally satisfying moment came 6 weeks after my return when I encountered Michael Peterson, the strategic consultant who had shadowed me before my firing. He had remained at Horizon, unsure of his position after Thomas's departure. "I want to apologize," he said when we met. "I did not know the full story when Thomas asked me to learn your role. I thought it was part of a legitimate knowledge transfer process, not preparation for pushing you out." Instead of dismissing him as I might have been tempted to do, I offered Michael a chance to prove himself in a new position, supporting our government contracts division. "Everyone deserves an opportunity to be judged on their own merits," I told him, "not on their associations." Now standing before the entire company 3 months into our rebuilding process, I could honestly report progress that exceeded even our most optimistic projections. The financial analyst's initial assessment gave us 12 to 18 months to return to profitability, I continued in my address. "Thanks to your extraordinary efforts, we are now projecting a return to profitability within 9 months, with full recovery of our previous market position expected by the end of next year." The applause that followed was genuine and enthusiastic, a far cry from the tense, mandatory celebrations that had characterized company meetings during Victor's tenure. "But our work is not done," I cautioned, as the applause subsided. "We still face challenges in an increasingly competitive market. The difference is that we now face those challenges together, drawing on the collective wisdom and talent that has always been Horizon's greatest strength." After the meeting, I returned to my office to find an unexpected visitor waiting. Diana Maxwell, the corporate counsel, whose intervention had been crucial to my return, sat in one of the guest chairs with a manila envelope in her hands. "I thought you would want to see this," she said, handing me the envelope. "It just came through official channels." Inside was a formal notice that Tech Giant Corporation had withdrawn its acquisition offer for Horizon Technologies, citing significant changes in leadership and strategic direction. Attached was a brief message from Victor Barnes to the board resigning his remaining shares in the company and severing all ties. "It seems you have won completely," Diana observed. "Victor has moved on to a startup in Seattle, and Thomas has taken a position with a competitor in Boston. Neither will trouble Horizon again." I placed the documents on my desk thoughtfully. It was never about winning. It was about protecting something valuable that they did not understand or appreciate. Diana smiled. A lesson many in the corporate world could stand to learn. She rose to leave, then paused at the door. "Harold would be proud, you know. Not just of what you accomplished, but how you accomplished it with integrity and without seeking revenge." After she left, I sat quietly reflecting on the tumultuous journey of the past few months. From dedicated employee to discarded liability to company leader, each transition had taught me something valuable about business people and myself. The betrayal had been painful, a shock after 18 years of loyalty. But without that pain, I might never have discovered my own strength or the true value of what I had helped build. In pushing me out, Victor and Thomas had inadvertently revealed just how essential I was to Horizon's identity and success. More importantly, the experience had reinforced what Harold had always emphasized, that a company's worth lies not in its balance sheet, but in its people, its values, and its impact. By treating me as disposable, Victor and Thomas had demonstrated their fundamental misunderstanding of what made Horizon special, and in the end, that misunderstanding had cost them everything. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder, a meeting with the search committee tasked with finding a permanent CEO. Edward had made it clear from the beginning that he viewed his role as temporary, a bridge to new leadership aligned with Horizon's renewed vision and values. What he had not initially shared but had revealed to me the previous week was that the committee was unanimously recommending me for the position. "No one knows this company better, cares for it more deeply, or has proven their commitment more conclusively," Edward had explained. "The board agrees that you are the natural choice." The prospect was both exhilarating and daunting. I had never aspired to be CEO content in my role developing technology and nurturing client relationships. But if the past few months had taught me anything, it was that sometimes the path we do not choose is the one we most need to travel. As I gathered my notes for the meeting, my thoughts returned to that terrible day in Conference Room B, hearing Thomas laugh as he fired me after 18 years of service. "You should be thanking us," he had said with cruel satisfaction. Perhaps in a way I never could have anticipated then, he had been right. The pain of that moment had set in motion a chain of events that transformed both Horizon and me. It had forced me to stand up for myself, to fight for what I believed in, and ultimately to step into a leadership role I might otherwise never have embraced. The lesson was profound. Sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest opportunities if we have the courage to face them and the wisdom to learn from them. Betrayal had led to growth. Ending had led to beginning. Loss had led to gain. As I walked to the boardroom for the meeting that would likely confirm my appointment as CEO, I carried that lesson with me, grateful for the difficult journey that had brought me here and excited for the road ahead. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something positive in your life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes what feels like our lowest moment can become the foundation for our greatest success. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement during a difficult professional transition. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your worth is never determined by how others treat you, but by how you respond to that treatment.